Hello and welcome to another Rush Duel Links video. Today we're going to be updating our tier list because it has been a week since the latest box dropped Galaxy New Road. So first things first, this meta is sort of a 3-deck meta. 3 of the brand new decks we got being Light Galaxy Fusion, Dark Galaxy Fusion and the 7th Road Spellcaster are definitely the front runners and definitely do stand above the rest in the current meta. We are seeing basically only these 3 decks realistically topping. If we go and take a look at some of the tournament results, we can see that Light Galaxy Fusion has gotten 26 top 8s, 16 top 4s and 5 tournament wins. Spellcasters with 1, 8, 19, and then Dark Galaxy with 2, 5 and 8. The only other decks that have even broken into top 4 are Dark Galaxy, Dragon Fusion and Matarian Caster, which is basically Spellcaster Fusion but with some of the Matarian cards thrown in. So if we're going to take a look at our pie chart, we can really see that the meta has been very Light Galaxy dominated, with Spellcasters and Dark Galaxy also taking up the rear, then these little tiny sections for some of the other decks. Now there are some other decks that have been making the top 8 finish but haven't really broken into that top 4, so those will be our lower tier decks. But I do think that without a doubt we do know that these 3 decks are the decks to beat. They are definitely the 3 top dogs. So first things first, Light Galaxy I think goes straight into tier 1. So Light Galaxy currently has the most tournament wins, as well as the fact that its skill is really strong. All we have to do is find Galactica Oblivion, then we can discard it to the graveyard, draw a brand new card to replace it, so we've gone even in economy, and then get to create a brand new card from outside of our deck and add it to our hand, which can be our Extra Explorer, a copy of Fusion, or Secret Order, which is fantastic for setting up both fusion plays and just some aggression. So the skill, fantastic. The way the deck works, also fantastic. And these results are before we got the release of Leica, which has just been added to the trader, which means this deck is probably going to see a little bit of a jump in power from where it is when it's already arguably the best deck in the game. So Light Galaxy is in an absolutely fantastic position and definitely the strongest deck in the game right now. So next up, it's definitely going to be Spellcaster Fusion. Now they only have 1 tournament win, but they do have more top 4s and a lot more top 8s. And this deck is especially prevalent because this is a structure deck primarily, which means you can get 1 copy for free, 1 copy with gems, and then you only actually have to purchase 1 with real money, which makes it very free to play friendly. But this deck is really strong and definitely deserves tier 2. So the skill for this deck effectively gives you a +1 every turn, as well as the fact that we can turn the skill on by having one of 9 different cards in our hand, and we can search one of 12 different cards from our deck. Obviously there are only 4 different cards, but there are 12 copies in there, so the deck has a really strong skill. But more than that, the boss monsters this deck got are actually really good. Charmy Witch is absolutely fantastic because we can change the back position of one of our opponent's monsters as well as give it piercing, which means it is a great deck at getting damage through set 3. On top of the fact we got Strange Witch, which lets us have easy access to our Charmy Witch because we can activate the skill, search for any 2 cards, send 7th Road Witch to the graveyard, and then immediately summon out the Strange Witch, which can then immediately special summon back our 7th Road Witch, which is just a really fantastic turn 1 combo that basically just gives you a free +2, gets your boss online really easily, and then lets you still make other plays as well. So this deck is really strong. The only negative thing I really have to say about it is it doesn't quite have the same ceiling that both Light and Dark Galaxy have, but it definitely has the consistency to keep it with both, and definitely has the tools to really beat through anything, even if it can't necessarily always just OTK your opponent out of nowhere. So next up we have Dark Galaxy, and Dark Galaxy is definitely the weirdest of these decks. We're going to put this also into tier 2. Dark Galaxy is, it's a little bit luck dependent, it's a little bit high roll. If you see all the cards that you need, this deck is really strong. If you don't find all the cards that you need, this deck can feel very underwhelming. The skill this deck got is very similar to the Light Galaxy Fusion skill, but because it doesn't allow you to create that free card or search a card from your deck, then it's always going to be a little bit less consistent than the other 2 decks in the format. But this deck's high roll potential is insane. Chrysaor being able to attack up to 3 times each turn is fantastic. Being able to go to Theogonia and then bring back Chrysaor from the graveyard and basically have the exact same potential is again fantastic. Being able to go into Apocalypse and wipe the board and basically have a 3500 guy and then you only have to find another 2500 damage, just OTK your opponent out of nowhere, is again insane. The only real negative of this deck, again, is going to be the consistency, and if we don't find specifically Dark Prophet, going into any of our fusions becomes next to impossible. The only fusion that doesn't use Dark Prophet is Gigantomachia, which is quite a heavy investment to get out. So this deck's still very, very strong, and we have seen it win 2 different tournaments, so there is that. We could see this deck really pick up as we go forward, but as for right now, definitely a solid tier 2. So next up, we'll be going into our lower tier decks, and we'll start out with Dark Galaxy. Now, it might seem a bit weird, Dark Galaxy Fusion is on here, but also Dark Galaxy is on here. But Dark Galaxy, this is referring to using the Tearfing build, and specifically going into Cryosaur Turbo, where the whole point is we get out our Cryosaur, we activate our Tearfing skill to grab our equipped spell that gives piercing, give it to our Cryosaur who can attack 3 times, and attack 3 times with 2900 piercing, which can be really, really strong. So this is what this Requiem basically represents, and this is still a strong deck. Now, it is a little bit RNG, because it does very much depend on us milling a lot of monsters, but the deck tends to play a lot less spell traps, because we don't need any of the fusion stuff, and we do kind of go all in on this one strategy. The deck is very cheesy, but it can just steal wins out of nowhere, so I think this definitely deserves a shout out. But again, like we say, it's not necessarily the most consistent strategy, but when it does work, it works really, really well. Then we have Dragon Fusion. Dragon Fusion, again, kind of a boogeyman from the last format, but still reasonably okay. It has had a top. I don't think this deck is anywhere where it was, and realistically, I think there is probably a massive gap between tiers 2 and 3. Tiers 1 and 2, there is a gap there, but I would say it's not that big of a gap. The gap between tiers 2 and 3 is monumental, and I do think that although Dragon Fusion isn't in a horrible spot right now, it really does pale in comparison to the 3 decks above it. This deck is still good at doing what it's always done, right? You can still summon out your Dragia Star, get that double attack, you can still go into the Miragia Star. If your opponent's only got level 7 and unders, you can do the whole Miragia into Miragia Star OTK, and that can still work out really well. But I do think the deck is realistically a little bit slow for this current meta, and like we say, I don't think it really competes with the decks above it. Next up, we have Matarian Caster. Matarian Caster, again, did see a top 4 finish. This deck basically is the Spellcaster Fusion deck, but with the Matarian cards thrown in. And we're going to put this into tier 3, because this is just a weaker version of Spellcasters, really, but it does have the Matarian stuff in it, which is a little bit gimmicky, but can work out. Matarian Ashura Star is still fine. We have also seen players playing Hercules Star, and the reason being that early on, people did think that Spellcasters were going to be the strongest deck in the format. So what beats Spellcasters? Okay, we'll make a Hercules Star that can just spin 2 away, and it'll be a good, anti-meta pick. It hasn't really shaken out that way since Light Galaxy has kind of stolen the top spot, but this deck is still fine, and since it's basically the same as Spellcaster Fusion but a bit weaker, it seems weird to put it any lower than tier 3. And the last unique deck that we've seen top is going to be Chemicalized Pyro. Chemicalized Pyro is either a bottom of tier 3 or top of High Rogue. I think I'm tempted to put this top of High Rogue for now, because although this has an okay matchup into some of the decks above, it hasn't really been tested and it hasn't really performed at a high level yet. Realistically, if we're getting no top 4 finishes, I don't know if you deserve to be in tier 3, but like we say, the top of High Rogue is very close to the bottom of tier 3, so I don't think it really makes much of a difference. This deck still does struggle to get through set 3, and in some cases that can be really, really bad. In this meta especially, there are quite a few turns where sometimes you'll just have to set 3 cards, you don't really have much going on, and the Pyro deck won't really be able to capitalize on this, so they will just kind of be sat there waiting until you get aggressive against them, and then they kind of do a counter attack. This deck is still okay, right? The skill is still fine, you still get that +1 every turn. You're still good at breaking a board if it's 3 attack position monsters, because Salamander can reduce all of those monsters' attack, especially since all of the best decks right now are milling a lot, which means they fill up their graveyards quite rapidly. But again, this deck can struggle to beat set 3 pass, and it hasn't really proven itself yet in this current meta. So now we'll talk about some of the other decks, and the first deck is going to be Heroes. I think Heroes is in an okay spot right now. Realistically, Heroes again is not going to be taking games off of the top 3 decks very, very often, but the game plan it has is relatively consistent, the skill it has is fine, Burst Wingman is still a really good card, popping back row and gaining attack is still really good. I personally just think that with the latest box, we've really seen a lot of power creep in these 3 decks, which has made everything else feel a lot worse by comparison. Before this latest box came out, Heroes were arguably the strongest deck in the game, and it really just goes to show that just one product release has really dropped them all the way down to a High Rogue deck. So Heroes, I think you can probably still get some wins with them. It's still a fine deck. It's just nowhere near these 3. And I think that's going to be something we see a lot with these decks going forward, is if you're not one of the big 3, you're not really going to be doing much. So next up, we have Beyond Curiosity. Again, this deck was in an okay spot before, but now definitely feels a bit like a rogue deck. Being able to turbo into Yggdrago is fine, but all of the best decks right now don't really care about a 4000 guy. Outing a 4000 guy is very easy now, even without Talismanic Seal Array. Eternal Galactic Oblivion can just boost over it. We can just get rid of it using our Dark Hole device, or we can just attack over it with any of our fusion monsters other than Charmy. So Yggdrago definitely does feel like it's in a bit of a weird spot right now, but really it only had a little bit of a stint in replayability after the ban list hit, so it's not too surprising. Then we have Join Tech or Machine Good Stuff, and this deck, yeah, again, it's not necessarily in like a horrible place, it's just it's been bumped down because of all the new decks that have come in are just so much better. This deck still does what it's always done, right? You can still go into Rex, you can still pop a load of back row, you can go to Innovate, you can boost its attack up, you have good access to piercing. The deck is still, like, okay, but it's too slow when compared to these three brand new decks. And I think this is the biggest takeaway from this tier list, is if you're not these three decks, realistically, you probably shouldn't be taking it to an event. If you're not one of these three decks, you're probably not realistically a competitive contender, and that's just kind of the way the meta has gone right now. Really, we are in a 3-deck format, and everything else is just gravy. Then we have our other new deck, the Draonic deck. This deck is okay, but it has some glaring issues. First off, it doesn't really have any way to beat set monsters. It doesn't really have any good way to beat fusion monsters. It also is a deck that has a lot of zero defense, which is really bad in a meta where we have a boss monster that changes a monster to defense and then pierces over, or Meteor Charge, which changes a monster to defense and then pierces over. So having zero defense is really, really not good for this deck. It's really not in a great position, and I hope that a really interesting build comes out that really gets to do something with this, but at the moment, Draonic, not very good. So then we're going to have Cyber Dragons. Again, it's just a little bit underwhelming. It does what Cyber Dragons has always done. You get to summon out a load of guys really easily. Ancient Golem is still a nice boss monster, but again, it's just slow when compared to the three best decks in the game. It's just realistically so underpowered by comparison, so we can't have it higher than Rogue. Then we're going to have Worm Fusion. Worm Fusion, again, was quite a powerful deck not that long ago, but it just doesn't really compete with these other decks. It's still fine. I think Worm Fusion can still get wins. It can definitely still hold its own in this meta, but again, against the top three, it's always going to be a bit of an uphill battle, and it's not really favored into any of those matchups. Then we have Psychic Fusion, and I think Psychic Fusion is probably still okay. We're going to put this in High Rogue. I don't think this is a tier 3 deck anymore, and that's just because Psychic Fusion, I think, still can compete to a certain extent, but you need to get really, really good hands really, really early. If you're not getting like the perfect turn 1, turn 3, turn 5, the deck's not realistically winning. You need to gain a lot of life points, you need to gain them very early, you need to make sure you're not getting OTK'd. If all of those three things happen, Psychic feels like it can be okay. But other than that, it does feel a little bit weak in the current meta. Then there's Santa Mill. I have seen a few people try and make this work, but I think Santa is just really not in a good spot. Even though a lot of the best decks right now are milling themselves a lot, it really does feel like Santa really needs to god hand their opponent to actually deck them out before just getting killed. Because all three of these decks can relatively easily kill you through defense monsters, so Santa can't really stall them out, and that's really the issue. If Santa can't stall, it just kind of dies. And right now, Santa can't stall. Then we're going to have Red Boot. Red Boot also feels like a high rogue deck. Again, it's fine, it's just not those three best decks, right? And I think this is something we're just going to keep echoing again and again. The deck can still put out a decent amount of damage, getting Draonic Resonance is still really good, it kind of acts like a Dark Hole device, but Dark Hole device is arguably just a better version. Overall, this deck is, again, it's fine, but fine isn't good enough anymore. You need to be really, really strong to fight in this current meta. And then last but not least, we're just going to mention Gaia. We haven't really been seeing a lot of Gaia, but Gaia definitely kind of feels like a rogue deck right now. Being limited to only using the Gaia bosses and your Gaia bosses only being able to get up to 29 feels really, really bad. So Gaia does not feel like it's in a great place right now. We haven't really seen any results from Gaia in tournaments since the nerfs, so we're just going to leave this in Rogue. But this is the list as we see it right now. Now again, I do want to stress there is a massive gap between tiers 2 and 3. You could even say that everything in tier 3 is actually high rogue and there is just an empty tier 3. I think that would also be perfectly acceptable because this really does feel like a 3-deck format. If you're not playing Light Galaxy Fusion, Dark Galaxy Fusion, or Spellcaster Fusion, it really does feel like you're not really playing the same game. These decks are all just so powerful, so fast. All of them are able to OTK, all of them are able to get through set 3 pass. They are just fantastic decks, and everything else does feel a little bit underwhelming by comparison. But let me know in the comments down below what you think. Which of these would you move up? Which of them would you move down? Which ones are in completely the wrong place? And what is your sleeper deck that is not one of the big three that you think could fight in this meta? But thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you next time.